Hey there. Alright, so there are 15 videos before this one in this playlist that I'm putting together, and most of the stuff in there is actually pretty boring to the average person. And in the last few videos before this one, I actually had a bit of difficulty trying to figure out how to say things in short form without going into these really long dissertations. And I can assure you that just because the explanation wasn't all that good doesn't mean that I couldn't have explained it if I had given myself more time. But I'm not trying to make this into a full 10 hours worth of video, and God forbid 30, 40, 50 hours worth of video. I'm just not trying to do that. Uh, so hopefully the content of this playlist will only get things started, start the kind of conversation that I believe that society needs to have. Uh, People are just way too emotional and anti-intellectual and don't like to think deeply about issues that affect them directly, but they want to fuss and whine and carry on when things go terribly wrong, and when they can't be sure where the next meal is coming from or how long they're going to have a roof over their heads, how long they're going to be employed, and so forth. Of course, then there's the great resignation where people don't want to get vaccinated, even though the place where they work at, it's mandatory because either they're a healthcare worker or an educator, or they work for a company that has 100 or more employees, or whatever the case may be. Now, I fortunately don't have to deal with that issue. I work for a small company, and since we don't have at least 100 employees, and we're not a healthcare agency, nor are we educators, I can remain unvaccinated if I so choose. Um, but hey, that's the breaks. What can I tell you? Um, so, this video is about what I believe is coming in 2022, 2023. I haven't given it an official title yet as of the shooting of this video. Uh, I'll do that sometime after I finish making it. But let me say this, that in the beginning of 2020, I began to write something that I thought was only going to be about 5 pages long. And then once I got to five, I said, well, maybe I'll finish it in 10. But then, the thoughts of what I needed to write about just kept coming, and it got up to about 50 pages. It's a Google Doc. It's still in my laptop. So, and I never actually finished it, but it just got so much longer than what I had intended for it to be, and became something in the way of a book. And I was actually trying to do what I've done in this playlist, which is to lay out some spiritual truths and how they translate into everyday life, and what kinds of things we can expect to come down the pike based on uh, a certain spiritual pattern. Um, and the pattern that I played off of the most for those 50 pages, as well as for this playlist, was Revelation chapter 6, which tells about the four apocalyptic horsemen. Uh, so, first one went out conquering and to conquer. Was given a crown, went out conquering to conquer. The horse was white. Second was a red horse. Its rider was given power to make war. Third was a black horse. Riders given a set of balances, went out saying, a measure of wheat for a day's wages, 3 measures of barley for a day's wages. Fourth horse was a pale horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed close behind. Okay, and so um, not everything that I have to say is expressly spelled out in Scripture. I've taken Scripture and thought deeply about it and connected Scriptures that other people have not connected, such as Genesis chapter 6 and Revelation 14:4. Genesis chapter 6 tells us about how the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took them whomsoever they pleased, and their sons became giants and dwelt in the land. Long story short, sons of God were supposedly men from heaven. The daughters of men were earthly women. So at some point, these guys from heaven who were anatomically correct were brought down to earth, mated with women of the earth. The combination of heavenly and earthly genetics caused their sons to become giants. And then you get the story of Noah. And then Revelation 14:4 describes the 144,000, a nice little numerical coincidence there. And it says, they follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth, for these are they who were not defiled with the women of the world. So there were two groups of 144,000. The first group disobeyed by being intimate with the women of the world. The second group of 144,000 had some different, more difficult tests, in the same way that Jesus, the second Adam, had a more difficult test than Adam did. Okay, so I'm putting things together and drawing additional conclusions. Okay, but and I've done that with Revelation chapter 6, and I don't think that I'm wrong for making that type of effort. I'm not going to claim with absolute certainty that I'm correct, but I'm definitely not wrong for trying. And anyway, I never finished that Google Doc or published it, but this is my second effort along those lines, and even though I have still had a little bit of difficulty figuring out where to take things, how to explain things that I've actually thought about for years, but I've never made an effort to explain certain things because as I tested the water, as I initiated conversation about some of the easier spiritual matters that I've thought about, a lot of people have put up resistance to it. Some are not church people at all, and I can't really hold them to the same standard that I can hold churchgoers to. You know, you don't even read the Bible. I can't say that you're at fault for not understanding what it says. I have to first convince you that the God of the Bible is the true God, and then get you to read the Bible before I can hold you to anything that it says. So if I can't convince you that the God of the Bible is the true God, then all other conversation about the Bible is all for naught. But as for people who have been in the church for quite some time, and who at least should know much of what the Bible says, when they don't want to have deeper conversation, they don't want to do more than just scratch the surface, they are in fact at fault. In Hebrews chapter 6, verses 1 through 6, it tells you to stop laying again the foundation of your faith. No, get away from the basics. Stop laying again the foundation of your faith. Move on to something meatier, something more difficult, and it says elsewhere in the New Testament that, first you get fed with the sincere milk of the word, and then you move on to other stuff, okay? But a lot of people only want to talk about the scriptures that the pastor highlights, and the pastor tells them what they want to hear because he or she wants people to put money in the offering plate, and people don't put the money in the offering plate when you tell them what they don't want to hear, even if it is the truth. Okay, and so there's that. But anyway, um, so that's let me see what else I did not say that I already have written down. Oh, okay. So I do believe, that God actually uses that pattern more than once, of the four apocalyptic horsemen. I think that they're symbolic of the types of things that God does more than once, and that these apocalyptic horsemen were probably just apparitions where God took his will, and somehow just breathed out an essence that embodied his will, and and maybe it was just some sort of cloud of God's spirit, of God's essence, of whatever God was getting ready to do to the world, and he breathed it out, and it moved toward the earth, and it broke apart into particles and landed wherever it landed, in much the same way that we read about Pentecost and how these little tongues of fire landed on people's heads, didn't burn them, but it was the Spirit of Jesus entering their heads. In the Old Testament, God deposited his spirit in the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, and you had to be really careful about approaching it. You had to make sure that you were one of God's designees, and also that you handled it properly. And there was a guy, I think, named Uzziah, who was alongside the Ark of the Covenant when it was being transported. It had been stolen by another nation, and it was being transported. And then as the Ark began to fall, uh, this guy reached over to try and level it, and he fell dead. And he was one of King David's chief men, and David really mourned his death. But hey, he broke God's law, and he died. Uh, but but anyway, in the Old Testament, God put his spirit into the Holy of Holies, into the Ark of the Covenant. But in the New Testament, the changing of the guard, or shall I say the changing of the gods, we go from God exercising direct authority over the world to God just kind of backing up and letting Jesus exercise direct authority. But of course, Jesus is still learning from God, still sitting at the right hand of God. I shouldn't even say that God has stopped exercising direct authority. It's probably more something along the lines that God is just kind of calmed down and not as harsh as he was in the Old Testament, because he has an obedient student, Jesus Christ, sitting at his right hand. So a lot of the harshness that God would have otherwise exhibited, he's just kind of backed off and allowed Jesus Christ to just learn from him. And Jesus, of course, showed his obedience by going to the cross. And he obeyed the Father even unto the point of death. And so now he's allowed to be the mediator until he's set free as the ruler of the new earth. Okay? And I don't believe that God and Jesus are the same being. They're unified, but they're not the same being. But anyway, I know I'm saying stuff that I really think about a lot. And I've actually said it a few times in previous videos in this playlist. But anyway, so somehow, that was meant to go back to talking about the nation, but I just kind of went off on a tangent there. But so anyway, I do see where there's a well, I know what I was saying is that God uses this pattern with the four apocalyptic horsemen repeatedly. I think I'm not saying that God said it, but I think, and he probably has different doses of these spiritual essences that he sends out toward the earth, and I actually think that the 4 years of the Trump presidency actually correspond with uh, the most recent, shall I call them, doses of these four apocalyptic horsemen. And so, I mean, 2017, he was just taking office, January 20th, 2017, went out conquering and to conquer. That's actually not a warring spirit. It's just a rational spirit. It's just says, this is how I conquer this or that situation. This is how I become a leader, an authority. I'm going out and I'm taking something over and I'm becoming an authority, or I'm exercising power over some group or some aspect of nature or something. I'm just exercising authority, exercising power. You know, you don't actually, you're not actually fighting against anyone in order to assume that power. You're just assuming that power uninhibited, pretty much. And or at least without war. And so 2017, he without war came into the presidency. In 2018, well, he never actually went to war literally, uh, but of course in 2018 we had the midterm elections, and that wasn't a full-scale war. It was definitely a political fight of sorts, and the actually, let me think. It's 2021, but I actually think that is, if I'm not mistaken, that year the Democrats got a majority in both chambers. I could be wrong on that, but it was definitely a political fight of sorts, and things that happened in 2018 led to his first impeachment in 2019. Uh, and so he was definitely at war with the Democratic establishment. Uh, so in 2019, well, I'm of the belief that if a U.S. president does a second term, then by the end of their 5th year in office, that they actually have developed the God element in their mind that I mentioned in previous videos. I'm not going to rehash that though. Um, you can go back and you can listen to what I said about how men are born with 10 spirits of thought in their mind, and how you can develop an 11th later on in life. And okay, so I know I said a little bit now, but I'm not going to say any more about that. You can go back and look at the previous videos. But anyways, so I do believe that in 2019, that or definitely by his 3rd anniversary as president, by January 20th of 2020, that he had definitely, within his 3rd year of office, developed this God element in his mind. And I don't mean some sort of fictional God element. I mean that your mind really does get upgraded. And so, by him knowing that he is an evil man, because evil people know they're evil, but by him knowing he's an evil man, and by him knowing that the system wasn't able to remove him from office despite his evil, that probably made him feel really empowered, which is part of what this 11th element of the mind is about. what causes you to develop it, and so I do believe that during his third year in office, between January 20th of 2019 and January 20th of 2020, that he did actually upgrade mentally, even though he acted crazy. He still acted crazy, but him having beat the impeachment uh, empowered him. And so you don't have to be U.S. president for 5 years in order to develop this part of the mind, and you can do it sooner. You can do it without even being president, but it surely helps. And I would also say that while most people don't actually develop this 11th sphere of thought in their minds, uh, and while there's less than 1% of the population that does develop this 11th sphere of thought, their mind becomes more organized. If you become U.S. president, you're almost guaranteed to develop it. Especially if you're a two-term U.S. president, then you're guaranteed to develop it, but you can do it sooner. So then the third year of his presidency was mostly 2019, and the first 20 days of 2020. Within that time frame, I believe that he did stuff that basically corresponded with this third apocalyptic horseman. And then in 2020, between January 20th, 2020, when he began his fourth year, and January 20th, 2021, within that year, he did stuff that basically corresponded with this fourth and final apocalyptic horse. The rider's name was Death, and Hades followed close behind. And I believe that Donald Trump basically brought about the death of U.S. geopolitical power. He actually began that process well before his fourth year, but I believe that stuff that happened in 2020 really capped it off. And let's not forget that he had made a promise to the Taliban, which Biden inherited. And so that leads to, Biden being left with the mess that Trump created. And just like Revelation says, after this fourth rider, whose name is Death, that Hades follows close behind. I believe that Biden is really going through Hades right about now. So the death that we've seen is the death of geopolitical power of the U.S. And now Biden is left with a somewhat weakened U.S. government, weakened in terms of our worldwide reputation, weakened in terms of what we could influence geopolitically, and now, his loss of geopolitical influence that was brought on by Trump has been deepened. He just went to the G20. I don't know when you're watching this video, but today is Halloween 2021, and Biden is still over in Europe attending the G20. I think today might have been the last day, so he may be coming back to the U.S. tomorrow. But when he went there, he had hoped to be able to show that the U.S. government, the U.S. Congress, had bought into a full-scale environmental plan to reverse global warming, or at least stop any further global warming. And our Congress over here has been bickering about that stuff and bickering about the Build Back Better plan that Biden had, his economic package. And so it's being talked about by the news and by the political pundits, including earlier today, Halloween 2021. Uh, I do like watching Meet the Press, and this is a Sunday, and Chuck Todd was talking about how Biden was not able to go to Europe with a political victory from here at home, and he was not able to put the U.S. forth as a leader in the on the environmental front. So there's that, but that just shows a further weakening of the U.S. geopolitical influence.